When it comes to the most popular and beloved JRPGs on the Super Nintendo, yeah, that's the only one I own physically, because most of the popular ones are very expensive nowadays. Christ. Anyway, the thing is that the Super Nintendo is 30 years old, so I'm here to celebrate with this video. Now, there are 32 JRPGs released outside of Japan for this amazing console, but almost half of them are pretty much popular, and almost half of them are pretty much obscure. So what's left in the middle? Just five JRPGs that I think are criminally underrated. Alright, time to celebrate 30 years of Super Nintendo with these 5 games. Let's begin! Number 5, Breath of Fire. Yeah, it's one of the most popular too, but let me explain. I feel like most people praise 2, 3 and 4 all the time and always refer to 1 as the meh title, as if it wasn't just as good. For today's standards, they might be right, because it definitely feels lacking in some areas, but you gotta understand that back then this was a sensational title and the start of this iconic series. Without this first entry being successful, you know Capcom, the rest would never have existed. It's a very traditional JRPG that I often recommend. Just keep in mind it was one of the first. Capcom was merely testing the waters of the genre back then, but for its time, the game's actually great. Sure, some difficulty spikes and random encounters galore, but come on, weren't most RPGs back then the same? And I personally feel those 2 flaws were 10 times worse in the second game than in this one. Give this one a try if you can, just to see where this amazing series began. It plays very well despite its so-called defects. Number 4, Illusion of Gaia. This is an action RPG developed by Quintet. Most people know their ActRaiser games, also for the Super Nintendo. The company went bankrupt in 2004 after the release of an Inuyasha game, another RPG on the PS2. After ActRaiser, they developed a hidden gem called Soul Blazer, which marked the start of the Quintet trilogy according to fans. Illusion of Gaia was the second game, still exclusive to the Super Nintendo nowadays, never been released anywhere else, not even digital. You control Will, a boy with psychic powers that is tasked with saving the world from a dimensional being called Dark Gaia. Will fights normally, but he also can transform into 2 other characters, Frieden and Shadow. For the longest time, you'll switch between Will and Frieden, as certain areas or puzzles or even enemies are obstacles to the other. Shadow will come late in the game, but that's a spoiler. Overall, the game has great controls, some difficulty spikes in some puzzles or battles, but nothing too hard to overcome. Great game here, its original name being Illusion of Time, though I believe time itself has forgotten all about it. Number 3, Ogre Battle March of the Black Queen. This is one of those games everybody knows, but no one has ever played. The reason must be that it's a real-time strategy game, and those are usually very niche. It also got an enhanced port on the PS1 a few years later. Here you will control an array of small groups of characters and monsters that will fight under your command. The goal is to travel around these large maps in a story with different routes and endings. It doesn't focus a lot on the plot, but it's there and it's very well written. You need to give each commander a specific route to follow so they can either conquer, save, or destroy a city. If they make contact with an enemy unit, a turn-based battle will start. You can use cards for attacks, buffs, or debuffs, but your characters will act on their own. So creating formations and therefore tactics on the menus is the best you can do. It sounds complicated because of the micromanagement, but trust me, it isn't that complex. Overall, a great game that might not be for everybody, still not changing the fact that it's criminally underrated. Number 2, Terra Enigma. Terra Enigma is only popular because it's known for being one of the best Super Nintendo RPGs never released in North America. Only Europe got it after its localization. It's the third game entry in the fictional Quintet trilogy and plays similar to Illusion of Gaia. It follows the story of Erick, a young boy with a very heavy task of resurrecting the world. He lives in the underworld, where everyone and everything's been frozen, so his goal starts with just that. It honestly has the best story out of the three games, including some dark stuff here and there. Gameplay, like I mentioned, is from a top-down view, and it's pretty much area and dungeon crawling controlling Erick, similar to Illusion of Gaia. He fights normally and the controls are great and responsive. Eventually, you start unlocking spells by collecting magic rocks dropped by the enemies. I guess this game never made it overseas because the first two games weren't a commercial success. Some blame Enix because they closed their North American branch in 1996, but Nintendo published the PAL version, so why couldn't they have done the same here? We'll probably never know. Number 1. Luffy 2 Rise of the Sinistros. In chronological order of the Luffy series, this is the very first game and an excellent one. People talk often of the giant Squaresoft RPGs being the best on the SNES, but rarely do we see the praise going to Luffy 2. In my opinion, it's on par with Chrono Trigger and it's one of the best JRPGs of its time. You play as Maxim and friends in a long quest to stop the Sinistros, a race of evil super beings wanting to take over the planet. If you play the first Luffy, then playing this explains a lot of its background plot holes. The controls, gameplay and interface are superb here, as is the battle system. It plays much better than in the first game, now letting you control the action of each character in your party. I love the sprite animations and the enemies appearing big on the screen, especially the bosses, which are epic. It's quite balanced, but it does have its challenge, not to be underestimated. The real hardcore part comes from its puzzles, which can be nerve-wracking, I guess, but there's no excuse around them nowadays, what with the internet and all. I've praised this excellent game lots of times before, but I still feel it deserves more recognition, enough to be considered by most people as one of the best on the Super Nintendo. Alright guys, those were my picks for today's video, 5 criminally underrated JRPGs on the Super Nintendo. What are your picks? Let me know. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. Long live the Super Nintendo! See you next time!